Incense burning, all space is filled with the fragrance. All Buddha smell it from afar. All spacious clouds gather everywhere. With utmost sincerity, all Buddhas appear. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. We pay homage, we offer clouds of incense to the Bodhisattvas and the Mahasattvas. And let's do the opening, the sadhana for Shakyamuni. Yeah. Oh, blessed one, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace. Inner peace, you who loved all beings without exception, are the source of happiness and goodness, and you guide us to a liberating path. Your body is a wish-fulfilling jewel. Your speech is supreme, purifying nectar. And your mind is refuge for all living beings. With folded hands I turn. Supreme, unchanging friend. And I request from the depths of my heart, from the depths of my, please give me the light of your wisdom to dispel the darkness of my mind and to heal my mental continuum. To heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Sing banquet of delight through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you. Upon you, may all suffering quickly cease. May all happiness and joy be fulfilled. And may holy Dharma flourish forevermore. So, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world, it's how we um, relate to what is going on that really determines whether we're going to be in a state of suffering or whether we're going to be in a state of peace. And the Buddha often talks about happiness, but he doesn't mean like this excited kind of happiness, but it's a kind of fulfilling, all encompassing happiness that allows you to go through the vicissitudes of life without being perturbed, upset, disturbed, and all the other things that happen to us when things aren't happening, when we think they should happen, how we think they should happen, on our timetable, in the way that we like. And so that's why we're caught in a loop and cannot get out, because we're continually laying the conditions for there to be. It's like being on a treadmill, like the gerbil has this round wheel, and that's how he exercises in the cage. And he just keeps going round and round. He can go fast, he can go slow, he can stop for a minute, and it'll go like this, and then he goes again. And that's how uh, the Buddha describes life for us. But he says there is a way of escape. Now, we think the way of escape is following the Noble Eightfold Path, right? And that's the first thing we learn about Buddhism, right? But that was the last thing he taught, because it wasn't so much of a teaching as an acknowledgement of a recognition of what had been attained through through developing the factors of enlightenment. So I always talk about us going, particularly in the West, to the back of the book. So we study with meditation, right, which is at the end of the Noble Eightfold Path, and then the Noble Eightfold Path is at the end of the 37 factors of awakening. Uh, so, uh, so it's why we have so much difficulty in number one, in accepting the Dharma in a way that it can really be a game changer. It can be useful in our life. It can transform the structure of appearances, how we see and understand things. Because by being taken out of order, we think we have attained something we have not yet attained. I don't think there's anybody in this room that has attained the Noble Eightfold Path. That's the Arya Magga. That's an arahanta path. So only when one has become an arahant are they on that Noble Eightfold Path. We need to understand what we are studying, and we need to know how to put it in a kind of order so that there can be progress. The Buddha would talk about, sometimes he just gave one Dharma talk, just one. He didn't have like a whole library of books and all of that. He gave one Dharma talk. And a person, the scales would not literally, would fall from their eyes, and they would enter onto the path. But why are people not entering today? If it's the same Dharma, it's because it is not the same Dharma. The teachings have been disrupted and corrupted in a way that is virtually impossible to attain. Virtually, but not absolutely impossible to attain. But we have to be willing to take in the whole counsel of the Dharma. That's more than what our little tradition teaches, more than what our little school teaches, more than what one patriarch taught. But we have to be able to hold the whole counsel of the Dharma. And when we do, then everything falls into place in its right way. So I was talking with not Buddha Master, but Zazi. Well, it's okay. I was talking to Zazi the other night, and we got into a discussion because we both have been charged with opening um, a a college on right cultivation and the correct teachings of the Buddha and the full counsel. So no, there's no different schools. There's no Theravada Vajrayana and Mahayana. There's only Buddhayana. That's what he left. And then it broke down into different schools and different camps, and some heard this teaching and some heard that. And so in the fragmentation, well, you know, we follow what we learned from our teacher, not your teacher. And in time, a lot of it became obscured, and a lot became unattainable because we didn't hold the container. He has a prescription for us. I think it's in Sutta number 60. No, I'm teaching from 60 today. Uh, yes, I do. Thank you. I forget the Sutta, but I read it this morning. And he says there's a prescription when there is a disagreement about um, something in the Dharma. And he says it is wrong to hold and cling tenaciously to your view, but you should go to the brother that you have or sister that you have a dispute with concerning what is correct Dharma, and you all should talk about it. Says, and then he says you should take that to others who are wise, not just in your camp, but if I really want to know the fullness of something, and I already know what I know from my camp, then it behooves me to find out what they know in the other camp, and I can put that into practice, and I can determine whether that is true or not, or certainly whether it's beneficial or not. And he says, then if it is, then you should take that up, and if it isn't, you can just set it aside. Just because you don't understand it or it's not your way doesn't mean that it's not true or it's not real. But we, in our ordinary mind states, we um, we parcel out in this kind of way. We do it in society. We do it, around academic things. I came from a world of academia. You never know it now. I got delivered from that. I came, and when we have rankings of in the science department who's a real scientist and who's not. So, like, if you study rocks, like or if you're like a geologist versus a different kind of scientist, like you don't count. They don't want to sit at lunch with you at the same table, because everything has been parceled out, divided, and ranked, and Um, that's the way of uh, the ordinary, untaught, he called it, run of the mill person. He says, but one who is intent on awakening, one who is intent upon wisdom, is one who is flexible, pliable, who's open and open to investigation. And to investigate something means that you have to not just read about it and say, well, I don't believe that's true, or I don't think it's like that. But to investigate something means that you have to actually put it into practice yourself to find out if it is true or not. And this is where we get stuck because we are uh, either unwilling to put something into practice that doesn't agree with our doctrine and our discipline. We're either unwilling to do it or we are afraid to do it. One reason we can be afraid is because we don't want to be wrong. We don't we don't want to be we don't want to be shown up. We don't want. It's hard for us to accept that our camp is not the right one, um, and we impute that onto our identities, and so it becomes above all else, maintain who you are and how you are, and even when we find out that we may have made an error or something else is possible, we grudgingly move to it instead of speedily moving to it. And these ways of it help us to become as little children, not to be little children. We got a lot of that going on in the adult world, but to be as a child. A child doesn't cling so tenaciously to things. There's a sense of wonderment. There's a desire to know. So the Buddha says, I don't say all desire is bad. I say that desire for spiritual things is good. Even when, he'd gone through his whole ascetic practice and so forth. And then he said that when he was he had almost starved to death. It's like, how can I find awakening if I'm dead? And so, he realized he needed to eat. And he did eat. And as he began to get his strength back, he found that he could steady his mind. He could concentrate better. But now, do you think he wasn't trying to steady his mind and concentrate all before that? He was. He was trying to. But he had not had the breakthrough, so he tried something else, and he tried something else. And he tells us in his experience all the things that he tried. But here's the thing, he kept trying until he found that which released him. So have you given up your trying? That's my question to you today. You know, and I can know the extent of my trying by my contentment with whatever comes in a day, or my fast recovery. The minute I realize that I'm off, trying to get back. There's a Chinese chant in the Mahayana, and I forget all of it. I always just remember the last part, so maybe that's the part for me. I think it's like 4 lines, and the last line is "Get back on the path." So that's the one. Do you know that chant? Okay. Um, so that's that. I just sing that part. Get back on the path, and so it's my constant mantra, my constant refrain when I'm thinking about things, and how I think is the most excellent way to walk out life, or to hold life, or to hold a situation. And if I see that I missed that mark in my mind, that refrain, get back on the path. Now, if we think we're on the path when we're doing all of these things, then there's no place to go. We're like, we have our back against the wall. But if we do uh, realize there is always room for improvement, until there's no more room for improvement, we'll be constantly looking for that which will bring us a greater contentment, a greater confidence, a greater happiness, a greater peace than what we now hold. Um, so today I wanted to talk. I wanted to say that about the 37 factors, and I want to tie that into the Buddha's incontrovertible teachings. And he started with, he has like a step-by-step means by which we can grow and develop, and we have to linger sometimes in one area before we can take the next step. I mean, if your knee is too weak, you like stop for a minute and you rub it. You don't just keep walking on it until you hurt it. The minute you feel some pain, you stop and investigate. See what's causing that. We do that like with a knee. How much more with the Dharma? So he talks about the 4 frames of reference, really beginning to focus on the body in and of itself as just body, or focusing on feelings as just feelings, or mind as just mind, or mental qualities, mind objects, thoughts, and so forth. It's just that. So when a thought comes up in my mind, and I can decide whether that's a beneficial thought or one that's not beneficial, whether it's useful or it's not useful, whether it's uh, uh, a kind thought or an unkind thought, and so I can just divide everything into two sides. And you might be just a little bit over the line, but on which side of that line am I just a little bit over? Now that's when we get into the little gray area about how far over do you have to be before it's like actually like wrong, and that's where we play all the time. But he said, make it better. Just decide this is acceptable as what I consider perfect behavior, and this is not. This isn't. This isn't. And he said, if we start dividing our thoughts into just 2 kinds of thoughts, not all the shades of gray, all the different ways of looking at it, all the different ways of holding it, but what spontaneously arises in line with your putting forth your highest and your best virtue. He said, then some of that gray will disappear from us. That's how we begin shore up what it is that we hold to be true and worthy of embarking upon, worthy of acting out in our lives. And since you have to do this minute by minute, minute by minute, minute by minute. And if we do that, then we will start, if we're not careful, we'll start to be judgmental towards ourselves. Judgmental in the sense of, I'm always messing up, flagellating ourselves. But if we recognize that that is selfing, even when I'm talking about, I'm so unworthy, that's still all about self. So he says there's no need to go there. He says the minute you recognize it, then just change your mind. If in fact you think that that's unwholesome or that it's not beneficial, how can you move your mind through willingness from where it is to another action? Now, times when you can use this is when you're upset with someone, and that's how you retrain the mind to hold your dignity when um, things don't go your way, and even when you know that you're in the right, or that someone else is definitely in the wrong. You may not be totally in the right, but someone else is definitely in the wrong. And how you can hold your dignity until you compose yourself, until you have, I want to say shifted the mind, but because that's a particular practice we're doing right now, I'm not going to use shifted mind, but you are moving your mind. It says whatever we think and ponder on becomes the inclination of our mind. So you're inclining the mind then in another direction. And it takes that continual inclining the mind in another direction to uproot that tendency and that knee-jerk reaction to attack around something that's not the way you would like it. You see, we have to use our proved, these are the weapons of our warfare. We have to use our proved weapons. There's no point in just hanging out in the camp of goodness where I'm all right, like hanging on to my strong suit. That's how the world does. You just let people see your strong suit. But he says we have to go to the places that scare us. We have to go to the places that we are weak, and he tells us how to correct, how to build up, how to fortify ourselves. And that is by when we're in that condition, if we can move the mind to the opposite. And we generally do this by asking, what would Buddha do? How would Buddha act? How would one who has compassion for beings, who recognizes that we'll all be set by ignorance, how would that one with that mind respond? And the first few times, the first dozen times, maybe the first 100 times, that doesn't work for you. But he said, keep going. In time, the mind will shift and the mind will incline if one is really willing, if one really uh, wants to. So a lot of our resistance is not because we can't understand it, not because we can't get it, like we just don't want to, and working at desiring to come into the fullness of the measure of the stature of the awakened ones has to be there for one to be willing to do this kind of work on themselves. Not on other people, but on themselves. So when you find a situation you think somebody needs to change, the only one that you can actually change is yourself. And this becomes our challenge. And and this is what, when we are practicing, or what the Buddha called practice. He called meditation a pleasant abiding here and now. He did not call meditation practice in that sense. So Zazie and I were having a conversation uh, around the word practice, and she says, but that's wrong. She said, that's not what Buddha Master uh, calls practice. He calls practice the preliminary practice is the Buddha Dharma of preliminary practice, formal practice, and concluding practice, where one imagines themselves as a Buddha with an enlightened mind and building up their power of imagination until they can actually actualize that and feel what it feels like to be there with an unencumbered mind. And that's the practice. She said, um, it's not what it says in the Theravada teachings. He said it's wrong. So I said, Master, I think, something can be different without being wrong. I said, I think that what Shakyamuni said and what Buddha Master said can both be true. Because one thing is true doesn't mean the other has to be false. I said, because if you look at it, when we are practicing in the moment to have or to respond in an elevated mind, that is our preliminary practice. We have to get to those places before we can sit and abide with the mind of a Buddha. It's a leap from here to here, and these steps help take us. I think of steps right in my mind's eye popped up what's that? The Great Wall of China. Each step is like about this tall. You have to almost climb up. Well, a couple of them, but most of them are so tall. As you start to get to the top, you just like, never mind. I'll just look. Because it's so hard to get up on them, and that's how it is for us sometimes. It's hard for us to get up on this, and so if we try to broaden something, stretch it to its boundaries, to its limits, to understand it, it's kind of like a trampoline, and that trampoline has to be fitted around that ring to get the bounce. And if we don't, then we just like cave in the middle. And part of the reason that we find it difficult to do this is because we quibble over the words and the meaning of words. Because my teacher taught it this way, and my teacher taught it this way. But words are what are ordinary conventions that we come up to try to describe, to point to these principles of wisdom. And if we get stuck on words, we'll just roll around in that minutia all day long. We will never enter into the direct experience and therefore the power of the Dharma. So I wanted to point us in sort of a different direction. This is like what I call a hack. When we sang today and we paid homage to Shakyamuni Buddha. So I guess some of us might think, well, why are you doing that? Because he's dead. He's been dead a long time. But if you look at his teachings, the reason why we think that is particularly because of a mistranslation of one word. I'm going to go into his incontrovertible teachings for the next 15 minutes. It says, there is no cessation of being. It said, householders, there are some recluses and Brahmins whose doctrine and view is this: there's definitely no cessation of being. Now, there are some recluses and Brahmins whose doctrine is directly opposed to that of those recluses and Brahmins, and they say there definitely is a cessation of being. So what do you think, householders? Don't these recluses and Brahmins hold doctrines directly opposed to each other? He said, yes, Venerable Sir. About this, a wise man considers thus: there are these good recluses and Brahmins hold the doctrine in view. There's definitely no sensation, but that has not been seen by me. If without knowing and seeing I were to take one side and declare only this is true and anything else is wrong, that would not be fitting for me. If their word is true, then it is certainly still possible that I might reappear after death among the gods of the immaterial realms who consist of perception. It says, so the doctrine in view, there definitely is no cessation of being. It's close to lust, close to bondage, close to delighting, close to holding, close to clinging. But the view of those good recluses and Brahmins who hold the doctrine in view, there definitely is cessation of being. It's close to non-lust, close to non-bondage, close to non-delighting, close to non-holding, close to non-clinging. And after reflecting thus, he practices the way of disenchantment with being to the fading away and the cessation of being. So if we listen to this, we might think that he says that the end of the path then is extinction, cessation of being, the extinction. Nobody, you know, I mean, that's very difficult to accept, number one. But here's the thing: the word for that has been translated cessation means to stop, kaput, cut off, no more, right? And the Buddha called that kind of teaching what? Nihilism. He said, that's not what I teach. So that word translated cessation of being is bhava nirodha. Nirodha means cessation, but bhavana doesn't mean being. It doesn't mean cessation of being. It is stopping the wheel of cause and effect, or getting off the karmic cycle of rebirth. But there is something after. And that one distinction in translation can forever alter a person's direction in the Dharma and also their acceptance of the full counsel of the Dharma. You know, like if somebody says, come go with me, I'm going to jump off a bridge, I'm not going. So we have to do our investigation. We have to ponder. And I have great respect for the teachers who come and say, yeah, I know that this is 2,500 years old and this is what y'all think is it and it's perfect, but how's that working for you? How many people getting enlightened today? You know, so it does necessarily require that we penetrate into the original meanings of things, or that we hold them up at least to some scrutiny, comparing scripture with scripture with scripture, so that we can find, you know, a resting spot for that allows our development. Now, in the same sutta, this incontrovertible teaching, that's in the back part of the sutra, but in the beginning, he said, householders, there are some recluses and Brahmins whose doctrine and view is this: that there's no cause or condition for the defilement of beings. Beings are defiled without cause or condition. Um, There's no cause for the purification of beings. Beings are purified without cause or conditions. There's no power, no energy, no strength, no endurance. All beings, all living things, all creatures, all souls are without mastery, without power and energy. Molded by destiny, circumstance, and nature, they experience pleasure and pain in the six classes. He said, but that has not been known by me, since there actually is causality. One who holds the view that there's no causality has wrong view. Since there is causality, one who intends there's no causality has wrong intention. Since there is causality, one who makes a statement there is no causality has wrong speech. Since there is actually causality, one who says there is no causality is opposed to all those who have actually attained and who hold the doctrine of causality. And from there, he went on and talked about some other things. He said there are some recluses and Brahmins whose doctrine is directly opposed to that of recluses and doctrines, and they say there are definitely no immaterial realms. What do you think, householders? He said, if without knowing and seeing directly, if I were to take one side and declare this is true and anything else is wrong, that wouldn't be fitting for me. Now, as to the recluses and Brahmins who hold the doctrine in view, there definitely are no immaterial realms. That has not been seen by me. Since there actually is, there actually are immaterial realms. The one who holds those views have wrong views. Who speak of that have wrong speech. Who intend in that way have wrong intention. And so he goes on in this way. And he says that there are these four kinds of persons in the world. The person who pursues practices that torture himself. Um, he torments himself and he pursues practices of torturing himself. That's like deep asceticism. The certain kind of person who torments others and pursues practices of torturing others. The person who does not torment himself and does not pursue the practice of torturing others. I mean, that's the kind of person. Sorry, let me go through four kinds again. I skipped one. A person who torments himself and pursues the practice of torturing himself. A person who pursues others, who torments others, and pursues the practices of tormenting others. And there's the person who torments himself and others, and the person who neither torments himself or others. You said, which one do you think is best? And so he tells us how we should be as we try to untangle and untie the knot. So one can let a person hold to their truth. One can simply give them another way of looking at something, but it's not to enforce that way of looking and understanding upon them. It's just to offer them the opportunity. And then you can leave it. You can leave it right there. You know, you don't have to go on a tirade. And I've been very guilty of that. I've been on a mindfulness tirade for 20 years. I really have, you know, because I understood how it was subverting the true Buddha Dharma, so people have no clue of what awakening really is and no pathway to get there. So then call it something else, you know, but don't call it the Buddha's teaching, because it's actually just the beginning. It's the first four of the 37 factors of enlightenment. It's the basement. And we end up our whole life thinking that's the sum total of it, and we never attain. And the Buddha says, whoa, to that one. Mm. And so your assignment for this week is to just Google the 37 factors, the 37 factors of awakening, because we're going to spend this year investigating the rest of those 37 factors. He says there are some There are some Brahmins and recluses who say that there is no other world but this world, since there actually is another world. One who holds the view there is no other world has wrong view, since there actually is another world. One who intends there is no other world has wrong intention, since there actually is another world. One who makes the statement there is no other world has wrong speech, since there actually is another world. One who says there is no other world is opposed to arhants who know the other world. Then he talks about a wise man. If there is another world, then on dissolution of this body after death, this good person will reappear in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. And um, and then he goes on, and I'm skipping over some of this, but you should really, really read it. What he talks about is ways that we can make contact with that other world. That's where I want uh, I want to end today, on where we can make contact, or how we can make contact with that other world. And he told us that if we put our mind on the devas, if there be any devas, the only way to find out is to put our mind on them, on the thought, on the uh, idea, the acceptance that there are devas. And one should think, oh, they ascended to these heavenly realms by virtue of their virtue. Now, I too am walking this path, striving for that same level of virtue. And it says confidence arises in one, that and a joy arises in one. And when that joy arises, you're automatically into the four right efforts of causing unarisen wholesome states to arise and subduing arisen unwholesome states. And as long as one can set one's mind on that, one can maintain those arisen wholesome states and keep unarisen wholesome states from arising. And so one can abide in a certain kind of peace and a certain kind of happiness. So when we're calling on the heavenly beings, it's not so much of a save me call, but it's a recognition that there is this mind that can be lifted up above the conditioning of this world, and that mind uh, I can create, I can arouse in me. And when one knows that and one does the thing to make it arise, then one will know whether that's true or not. So a lot of times you see me laugh or you see me smile. It's, you can have it. Maybe um, when we see, it's because we um, have not created the condition for the shift in mentality so that we can hold this moment from a very high place. And we're looking for some relief out here, but we may not find it out here. And so it's like if I say to myself, I shall put on a happy face, then shall my countenance be changed. There's a confidence in this. You do it a few times and you start to know the confidence. The problem with us who can do it is that we don't do it all the time, you know. But if we get more consistent with it, you know, then, and that's what I look forward to, the time that every time my mind goes to an unseemly space, I can change my mind right in that instant. Doesn't mean I don't have to deal with the situation. You can deal with the situation without having an attitude. You can deal with the situation without punching somebody out. You can deal with the situation, but the wisdom comes with the right mental state, is what I'm saying. The wisdom comes with the right attitude. And so he says, if we turned our minds to the great beings, those who overcame, those who attain, those who now abide in these pleasant states, it's like um, a tuning fork, and our vibration rises to the level and it abides there as long as we stay in that mind space. You ever met some people, they're like, they're just so kind and so sweet, so happy. It's sickly sweet. It's like get on your nerves. That just lets you know you got work to do, because sometimes it's just too much for me. Like, not everything is worth, smiling over. But they have learned a secret that if we employ this, it will really work for you. I remember one time I was, when I was I had a mortgage company, and the warehouser had guaranteed these funds for me, and I gave a commitment letter giving these people this loan, and that's how mortgage companies get their money. I mean, like, we don't have a gajillion dollars in the bank. We have a certain amount of money, and after you loan that out, you package that loan off, you sell it off to a warehouse and replenish your money, and so it's like we are there with the people moving the product, but the money comes from someplace else, so it's kind of like that. And so now they don't know the warehouser, they only know me, and now the warehouser changed their mind and they're not buying the loan. And the best thing you do is try to sell the loan before you even close on it, because then the money just passes between those two. You take yours out the middle. That's how mortgage companies exist and create, do what they do. And so I had to go now and tell these people I couldn't give them this loan. And I was on that phone ranting and raving, and I was just being a butt. I mean, you know, I was carrying on, and they were such nice people. I so wanted, this deal to go forward. And I had them tied up, for 2 months while, underwriters asking for this and asking for that and asking for this again and asking for that. And I have to tell them after all of that, wasted their time and could not give them that loan. And they came in to settle me down and said, it's okay. It's all right. Everything's gonna be like it's gonna. And I said, no, it's not all right. And they're like, no, really, it's all right. And then they just started singing one of these songs to me, you know. But I never forgot that experience, because like I'm the, well, I wasn't Buddhist at that time, but I was in a very serious spiritual, relationship with goodness. And so I thought, that this was a time for drastic actions against something that was wrong. And they were showing me that there's never a time for that. No matter how bad we think the times are, what retribution in our own mind um, we think is the only answer to something. He says that that's not the mind of the heavenly being. And so he tells us to recollect that they are abiding in the heavens. And as we begin to recollect, we begin to align with the frequency of that space. And we enter into it. The Buddha called it nirvana, here and now. So nirvana is not a place that we go to, a physical place. Um, Later, when we did the uh, memorial service for Buddha Master, we chanted the gateway to everywhere, not a physical place, but using the best we can use for words, it is a state that can be attained. Don't you want it here and now? Here's where we really need it. I joke a lot about conditions that I say, like, I'm just not used to that. I must have come from a heavenly world messed up somewhere, and my other karma is now, being walked out because I just don't get that, you know. Well, I laugh about it, but I really do think that's true. But while I'm here, I can catapult my mind back into that lovely place, to a state of mind called beauty. And it can be as simply as accepting, to put it to the test, the Buddha's teachings that there are indeed other worlds, way more sublime than this. And if one brings their conduct up to that standard, after the dropping off of this body, there will be the arising in those worlds. And each world gets progressively more sublime until one completely comes off the wheel of conditionality. And that's called the Pure Land, or the Buddha's land. And through their conduct, they enter. It's called the Gateless Gate, and it's also called the Gate to Everywhere. And then there is no more coming back to any state due to cause and condition, but at will. One makes an appearance out of their great wish for the liberation of all beings. So you have to know, what it is that you're looking for, and what it is that you can hold fast to. And if you just want some ordinary run-of-the-mill self-development something, then go right ahead. But if you want to run on and see what the end could be, commit to taking up the whole counsel of the Dharma. I read to you today from the Majjhima Nikaya, and those are the Theravada discourses. I didn't read from the Mahayana or Vajrayana discourses. Just think how delicious those are when they fully embrace and talk about this fully, because it's here thread running throughout our teaching that we use to try to be more rational. But he's not teaching rationality. He's teaching insight that leads to an absolute unbinding, if you think that is. The enlightenment factor of joy, it's a real thing. So if you don't want to do a whole lot of studying, you don't have to. That's the shorthand. Just into joy. Use that enlightenment factor. Because what it does is it clears away the cloud of confusion in front of you. Despite sound, the joy clears the path and you can see clearly. And you find your way of escape in every situation. After a while, hindsight becomes foresight.